Okay, here. Let's be honest for a second. We've all been there, right? You download something important, you open it up, and bam, it's a PDF. And suddenly it's like the internet just shrunk back down to a boring old printout. But like, have you ever stopped to think about why PDFs give off that stuck in the past vibe? Well, today we're going to deep dive into that very question, exploring those core differences between PDFs and their way more dynamic cousin. We're talking about HTML.
It's funny how something as simple as, a file format can spark such a deep dive, but you're really onto something with this feeling of stuckness. PDFs, they get treated like digital paper a lot of the time, but when you compare that to the vibrance of HTML, you start to see how choices like that impact how we experience, understand, and even use information.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping we could kind of unpack today. I don't know about you, but me personally, I hit download PDF out of habit half the time
Yeah.
without really even thinking about it, What are we missing out on?
Honestly, more than you might think.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we have a great roadmap for this. Rado Kodorov actually broke down 10 key differences between these two formats, PDFs and HTML, in a LinkedIn post. Really got me thinking. But instead of just like going one by one, how about we explore these differences thematically?
Ooh, yeah, sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, let's start with one of the most obvious and impactful differences, and that's the level of interactivity. HTML just allows for all sorts of dynamic elements that a PDF just can't handle.
Right. Even just browsing online, things like drop-down menus that hide extra information, clickable buttons, or even videos right there on the page. That's all HTML, right?
Exactly. And it's not just for show. Mushtaba Hamad wrote this fascinating piece. We'll link it in the show notes, by the way. But he talked about how each of those interactive components actually changes how we engage with the content. Think about it. You're way more likely to remember something that you've actually interacted with. Clicked on, explored further, stuff like that, compared to something you just passively read.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about being flashy. It's actually changing how we learn and remember information.
You got it. And this kind of ties into another big difference, accessibility. Now, when we're talking about accessibility in this context, we're talking about two key things: how easily search engines can understand the information, and then how usable the content is for people with disabilities, people who might be using assistive technologies.
Now that you mention it, searching for stuff in a PDF can be a real pain sometimes. It's like every bit of text is just floating out there in the void, no real organization. But when I'm looking for something specific on, say, like a well-organized website, a quick search, and boom, I'm there.
There you go. And that's because HTML, especially when it's well structured, gives you that context and hierarchy that PDFs just don't have. It's like, how can I explain this? Think of it like this. Trying to find something specific in a huge, messy PDF is like, I don't know, panning for gold in a muddy river, right? You might get lucky, or you might spend hours sifting through mud and not finding anything. But a well-made website, that's like a curated museum. Everything's labeled, categorized, easily searchable. And a lot of that comes down to something called semantic tags.
Okay, I'm going to need you to break that one down for me. Semantic tags. That sounds awfully technical.
Oh, it's simpler than it sounds, trust me. Basically, these tags are like little labels that tell search engines and other programs what the content is actually about. So instead of just seeing a jumble of text, they're like, okay, this is a heading, that's a paragraph, this is a list, and so on. It's like they're speaking the same language, which makes the information way more accessible. And when I say accessible, I mean both in terms of finding it easily and in terms of making it usable for everyone, no matter what.
That makes a lot of sense. So HTML is not only more dynamic and engaging for the average user, but it's playing a huge role in making information accessible to everyone. I'm kind of starting to feel like I've taken PDFs for granted.
It's an easy trap to fall into. But that actually brings us to another key difference that you might find particularly interesting, especially in our age of information overload. And that's how HTML handles data visualization and dynamic content. This is where PDFs really start to show their limitations.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. So we're talking about data visualization and how HTML allows for things that just wouldn't be possible in like a static PDF, right? And I have to say, as a visual learner myself, this is really interesting to me.
Well, you've come to the right place then. Imagine you're trying to understand this complex set of data. Could be anything, sales figures, climate change research, whatever. In a PDF, you're stuck, right? You've got your static charts and graphs. It's like getting a postcard from a roller coaster. You see the snapshot, but you totally miss the actual experience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's the whole point of using charts and graphs in the first place, right? To make the data easier to understand. If it's stuck in a PDF, it kind of defeats the purpose.
Exactly. Now, to take that same data, But imagine it in HTML instead. Now, instead of just looking at the data, you're interacting with it. You know, you've got these charts you can zoom in on, filter, even change in real time. Think about like stock prices or election results. Websites could pull all that in and update right in front of you. A PDF just can't do that.
It's like, what's a good analogy? It's like the difference between looking at a printed weather report versus just checking a live weather app on your phone. One's stuck, the other's constantly adapting, giving you the latest info. And in a world where everything changes so fast, that can make a big difference.
Huge difference. And it goes even further than that. Remember we were talking about HTML5 canvas features before? Imagine like interactive infographics where you can actually explore different layers of information or visualizations that respond to what you do. Honestly, some websites are practically mini apps now, built just for exploring and understanding data. PDFs just seem, I don't know, old-fashioned in comparison.
It's like we've gone from static pages to these interactive experiences, from walls of text to something easily searchable and organized, almost like PDFs represent the artifact of knowledge, like a specimen in a museum. And HTML is more about the actual process of understanding.
Ooh, I like that. That's a great way to put it. And I think it speaks to this broader shift we're seeing, right? How we consume information is changing. We don't want to just be passive anymore. We want to actually participate. We want to explore, interact, personalize the whole experience. HTML lets us do that in a way PDFs simply cannot.
It's almost like PDFs are very one way. Here's the info, take it or leave
I
it.
heard that.
But HTML opens up this whole other dimension of engagement.
Exactly. And that engagement, that active participation, it changes how we internalize stuff, how we apply it. Think about, say, learning a new language. A PDF textbook can give you the rules, but a website, you can have interactive exercises, audio of native speakers, even personalized feedback. Which do you think will be more effective?
The website, hands down. It's like the difference between reading about playing piano and actually sitting down and practicing that.
Exactly. And that goes for pretty much any field you can think of. Imagine a scientific paper, but it's presented dynamically online. You could have those interactive visualizations, links to related research, even the ability to contact the authors directly.
Wow, it totally changes how we engage with information. It's not a one-way street anymore. And in a world where information's constantly changing, that ability to participate in the conversation, it's essential.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to a really crucial point.
Hmm.
It's not just about how we consume information, but how it ultimately influences our decisions.
Oh, that's a great point. I can see how it all ties together now. So we've been talking about how, we experience information differently in a PDF versus something more dynamic, like on a website using HTML. But you're saying it goes deeper than that. It can actually impact the decisions we make.
Absolutely, it really can. Let's think back to those data visualizations again. A regular old PDF report might lead you to one conclusion, based on how it's presented, right?
Yeah.
But what if you could see that same data dynamically, explore different angles and possibilities? You might come to a totally different understanding, find new insights that a PDF just wouldn't have shown you.
It's like the difference between looking at a printed map and using like a live GPS. The map might get you there eventually, but the GPS lets you adapt to traffic, road closures, all that. You can make better decisions along the way, maybe even change your destination if you need to.
Perfect analogy. And that's what I mean. The way information is presented can really influence how we understand things and the choices we make because of that. It's not about right or wrong, but about having the full picture.
That's so true. How often do we just accept something because of the way it's presented? Like if we see a graph in a PDF, we don't always question it, right?
Hmm.
But if that same data was interactive, maybe we'd be more likely to dig in, look at it from different angles.
Exactly. And these days, we're just bombarded with information, right? So being able to think critically about not just what we're seeing, but how it's presented, that's more important than ever.
So the next time I'm about to hit that print to PDF button or just send someone a static document, maybe I need to take a second and ask myself, is this really the best way to share this? Am I kind of limiting the information or even influencing how someone might understand it just by using this format?
That is a great question to be asking, both as someone creating information and someone consuming it. It really highlights how we're not just talking about files and formats here. We're talking about how we as humans interact with the world around us, how we make sense of things.
This has been fascinating, honestly. We've covered so much. From how important interactivity is for learning to accessibility, all the way to how the format of information can actually shape our decisions. It's amazing what you can learn when you really deep dive into a topic.
It really is. And who knew that something like PDFs and HTML could be so interesting.
Right. On that note, I think it's time for us to come up for air. But hopefully you're leaving today with some new things to think about. The power of dynamic information and just choosing the right format for the job, those are big ones.
Absolutely. So, until next time, stay curious, everyone, and don't be afraid to question those assumptions.
You never know what you might find.